Welcome to Dear Texas Radio, where we encourage Texans to drop everything and read. Your hostess for today's show is Roxanne Berkey.
Good evening, and I am Roxanne Berkey, and I'm so honored tonight to have Peyton Woodson Cooper join me. She's an award-winning author, and Peyton, thank you for coming to Dear Texas.
Good evening. I'm happy to be on the show.
Awesome. So, Peyton, you and I have had a little bit of conversation, but I'm thinking that our listeners would really like to learn a little bit, not only about some of your awards that you recently have won, but also a little bit about your background. So let's start with your background, all right? How did you get into writing?
Well, it's always been a calling for me. As I always joked when I was a little girl, I would say that I wanted to grow up to be Lois Lane. I was always fascinated by journalism and the idea of being a newspaper reporter. And actually, journalism ended up being my first career path. I attended Southern Methodist University in Dallas. I majored in journalism, and then I entered the media industry. So I was a professional journalist covering mostly police, fire, crime. I did that for about 3 years, working for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and the Associated Press. So that was my first real entry into writing, and eventually just evolved from writing in the media to writing for corporate communications to finally deciding to take the leap and actually begin to write my own books.
Wow, that's certainly a wonderful path to be able to go down. So now that you're actually focused on writing your own books, you actually have kind of a variety of genres that you do focus on. I noticed that you have some children's books. What other items do you focus on in your writing today?
Well, generally speaking, I consider myself to be an inspirational writer. So my different genres are I write children's books, kind of for the Dr. Seuss age range. I then also write inspirational books, for example, Christian devotionals. And then on the fiction side of things, I write Christian fiction. And as a genre, Christian fiction can cover a lot of territory, from just light inspirational reads all the way to things that are maybe trying to convert people. For me, my Christian fiction more is on the inspirational side. It's more just about helping people find the best path for their life so that they can live the best version of themselves.
Oh, that's amazing. It certainly has given you a variety. Do you have a favorite in those areas that you mentioned, or do you like the idea of going back and forth?
I like the idea of going back and forth, but if I had to choose a favorite, I really love writing the children's books because it's nothing better than being at an event and a child actually buys your book and they want you to sign it and they want you to take a picture with them. So that's always so rewarding. And then in the Christian fiction space, I enjoy that because a lot of times my novels and novellas like to celebrate the everyday man. And I'm really drawn to that because I know a lot of times when you go to the bookstore and buy books, there are always these epic tales and far-off places with heroes and heroines, and people can't always relate to that. So with my books, I always focus on the everyday man who's doing things to better his or her life, to just show people and let them know that, yes, your everyday life is exciting and it is epic.
Well, absolutely, and it sounds like you really get a lot of good inspiration not only for your readers but also in general conversation. Where did you get that from? Where was that foundation for you, Peyton?
I think it starts with my personality. If anyone knows me, I'm definitely an introvert rather than an extrovert. And the thing about introverts is we sit and observe, and we take it all in. And so anytime I'm out and about, I'm always the person that's kind of listening in on other people's conversations or just watching people go about their daily lives. And so for me, I always find that fascinating just to kind of sit and watch the world go by. So when I decided to write my books and celebrate that every man, that's kind of what I draw on, just kind of anytime I'm in a situation, just watching people go about the daily courses of their life. And they may not think that the things that they're doing are amazing, but actually for some people, they really are.
So when you are writing your fiction stories, let's focus on those right now. do you draw your own self into these characters, or are you doing it primarily from those you've been observing and from some of the history you've had?
It's usually a mix of both. For example, my first novella, which was also one that was recently won an award, is called The Point of It All. And it's semi-autobiographical in that the lady or the heroine in the story, she's also a reporter. She's fresh out of college. She is also a crime reporter. She works nights. She works weekends. And for her, journalism was always her dream job. But after she's been in the industry for a few years, now she's starting to have second thoughts. And so she's having to wrestle with finding the courage to change. Because so often in our professional lives, a lot of times we identify with the work that we do. And we're like, well, if I don't do this particular kind of work, then who am I? What am I? And so she learns that, you know what, maybe I need to find courage to go out on a limb and pursue something different that's going to fulfill me, even though it may not be what people expect me to be. So that was an example of putting myself in a novel. Another one of my novels that was also recently recognized was Admit One, and it's one that celebrates classic films, and it celebrates those classic movie theaters, kind of those old vintage Art Deco ones that are sadly disappearing, but we do still have some of those in our community. And so for me, it was a way to give my love letter to classic films and to the people that work at those old movie palaces. So I usually do things like that to try to incorporate something I'm interested in into the stories.
Wow, it sounds like it. I mean, taking a look at movie theaters, and you're right, that is kind of a fading place for people to go and enjoy a cinema adventure. That's pretty cool. So what other items are you writing? I know that originally you had a debut book, and that was back in, I think, 2014?
That was my debut
and that was
book,
really,
and it was... Go ahead.
No, it was focused a little differently. So tell us about that one.
Yes, that one was a memoir, and people always joke with me. They're like, you know what, aren't you a little bit on the young side to write a memoir? And I would always laugh it off because, exactly. For me, though, it was a memoir about a time in my life and a former career, and I based it on my time in journalism. When I was in journalism, like, as I said, that was the first career that I had. It was the career that I always dreamed of having. But after a few years, I decided I wanted to do something more, because journalism is a great field, but it's kind of one of those all-or-nothing industries where there's no such thing as work-life balance. But as you get older, you have other priorities, you kind of maybe want to step away from that and do other things. So for me, when I reflected back on that time in my life, I think about all the great life lessons that I learned in journalism that I'm still applying throughout my life, because when you're a journalist, you have to learn to believe in yourself. You have to learn to be courageous. You have to learn to put yourself in difficult situations to get the story, to interview people that maybe you wouldn't normally talk to on a daily basis. So all of those skills that I was developing, I didn't realize it at the time, but they really became life lessons.
Well, there you go. So in order to do that one, that's certainly based on your own life and, as you said, a reflection or a memoir of what's going on. But it also was something where you really kicked off the self-improvement and inspirational kind of vein, right?
Yes. And that just really kind of came natural for me, because I asked myself, well, if I'm going to write something, what am I going to write about? And for me, I'm always interested in helping people overcome adversities of different times, of different types, because that's something that I've had to wrestle with in my own life. One of my biggest challenges fairly early on is I was in my 20s when I lost both of my parents. They passed away about a year and a half apart. So for me, that was one of those situations where I didn't really have a circle that I could turn to, because like I said, I'm in my 20s. People usually don't lose their parents that young. And so I felt like that was a time where I really had to figure out a lot of things for myself And I remember what that was like. And so it kind of became my motto that if I can ever help someone overcome adversity, I want to do that, because I remember what it was like to be in a situation and kind of feel like you're really having to carve out that path for yourself sometimes.
Right. I mean, that's definitely one of those life-changing situations that people do go through. And I think that we did talk a little bit about, before that, though, your parents were very influential in you picking the career path that you did when you went to college. And I'm sure your parents would be proud of you at this point.
Yes, they certainly were very influential. Like, for example, my dad, he was one of those people that just loved newspapers. And he was the kind that would let his newspapers sometimes stack up for the whole week. And then on a Saturday or Sunday, he would sit there and just read them all at once. And he was the kind of person where he just didn't read the headlines. He read the newspaper cover to cover. And so,
wow.
So being a little, yes. So being a little girl, you know, you remember growing up and you're watching Dad, and you're like, why is he so just intrigued by what's going on in this newspaper? And I remember being a little girl, and he would teach me the newspaper and teach me all the different sections and let me know what it means to read the lifestyle section versus the sports section. And so I think he kind of really started that just love of journalism, or that interest in journalism for me. And then for my mother, she was a writer as well. Even though she never had anything published, she was always writing short stories. She was always writing lectures for our churches. So I think that just both ways, I always kind of had that writing bug, or that interest in that.
There you go. So, Peyton, if you don't mind, we're going to take a short break and get a bit of a message from our sponsors. Then we'll be back, and I want to continue a little bit down this path, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
Dear Texas would like to thank our sponsors. McKinney, Texas has a rich history, one it embraces and loves to share with visitors. Nowhere is this more evident than McKinney's historic downtown, with more than 100 eclectic shops and eateries to explore. Situated just 30 miles north of Dallas, McKinney offers the perfect getaway from the urban hustle. For more about McKinney, check out www.visitmckinney.com or call 888-649-8499. The third annual short story contest begins March 1st and runs through July 31st. Enter your short story for a chance at prizes and getting published. To learn more about this annual event, please visit our website at txshorts.com. Dear Texas would like to invite you to the McKinney Square Book Festival on June 3rd, 2017. The event will be held at the Performing Arts Center from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Meet 40-plus Texas authors, many of whom have won awards. Special events will take place during the day, and a special musical guest, Billy Dawson, will perform at 2 p.m. For more information, please visit our website, mckinney.deartexas.info. Wimberley Valley Tourism welcomes people to explore the many fine shops, restaurants, and wineries that make Wimberley special. More at wvtla.com. From concept to casting, recording to post-production, Spoke Media is dedicated to creating a superlative listener experience. www.spokemedia.io. EBG 247, where you can find ebooks galore 24 hours, 7 days a week at ebg247.com. Welcome to Dear Texas Radio, where we encourage Texans to drop everything and read. Your hostess for today's show is Roxanne Berkey.
And welcome back. I am Rox Berkey, and I'm delighted to be part of Dear Texas Radio, where we do encourage everyone to drop everything and read. And I am so excited tonight to continue my conversation with Peyton Woodson Cooper, a genuine storyteller at heart. Peyton, I think that the variety of writing that you do between Christian fiction and inspirational nonfiction and children's books is just such an interesting blend. So I kind of want to go back a little bit, if you don't mind, to the children's books and find out how you go about marketing your children's books and talking about them. Do you have an avenue that you start with?
One of the things I like to do is I live in Katy, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. And it's nice living in Houston because, we're a major market and there's always a lot of different things going on. I always look for the different festivals that are usually happening on the weekends. Sometimes they are kind of child-focused, and if they're not child-focused, then maybe there's a niche where there's an opportunity for me to present and share my work. So that's always a really good venue for me and getting out in the public and meeting children. And then also, too, a lot of times with the different churches that are located throughout Houston, a lot of times they will do family festival Sundays or they may do book fair Sundays. And so that's also another opportunity for me to get in front of children and then also get to meet their parents as well.
Mm-hmm. No, and that sounds like a perfect avenue to be able to do that. And Katy is very much a family-focused and family-oriented kind of community, so I can see where you would have a lot of success in that area. So I know that you do write fiction and nonfiction, and do you ever find that they kind of bleed together, or are you able to keep them very, very separate?
I'd say they bleed together a little bit because when I'm writing the nonfiction, it's usually inspirational things such as inspirational essays about ways to just better live your life or approach situations, or if I'm writing devotionals, it's using scripture as a tool and a foundation to live the best version of your life. And then when I write fiction, it's that same kind of principle that whatever I'm doing with my main character, they're usually at the beginning faced with some type of adversity, but then they have that epiphany moment where they learn that there's a better way to go about doing something, or there's a better walk or a better path for them, and they have to learn to embrace that.
Have you found that in writing that style of book, the inspirational specifically, that you do a lot of internal reflection and maybe change some of your own choices?
I do. I do a lot of internal reflection, and I do a lot of just not journaling in the sense that I write something every day, but just from time to time whenever I find myself in a unique event or situation, sometimes I just want to write about it. And it may not be for a particular book that I'm thinking about at the moment, but it's just something that I write about that I want to put down so that in the future if I can come back to it, I can. And as you were saying, it does change the way I think about a lot of things, because sometimes I'll tease myself and I'm like, you know what, maybe you need to go back and read what you wrote in 4 books ago, because you're in a situation now where you're wrestling with something, and if you were able to encourage other people, then maybe you need to reread that and encourage yourself. So sometimes I have to joke about that and remind myself of that.
Well, there you go. So I know that you're very family-oriented, and so what kind of support do you get from your husband and from your immediate family in your writing and maybe even reading before you publish things?
I get a lot of support from my family, starting with my husband. He is my agent, so he's my hype man, as I like to say, and it's really helpful having that because I'm the introvert and he's the extrovert. So it's really funny that a lot of times I'll meet people and they're like, oh, I met your husband at the grocery store and he was telling me that you write books, and I'm like, oh, okay, because I forgot, oh, yeah, I did tell him, to go out there and hype me up. He's really good about doing that. And then also just my immediate family, from aunts, uncles, my sisters. They always have been very inspirational in just getting me to even write that first book. Before I decided to write a book, they were always asking me things like, oh, so when are you going to write a book? And I'm like, I'm not writing a book. They're like, oh, I think you're going to write a book. You have a book in you. And they would just tell me that over and over again. And I guess they were seeing something in me that I wasn't initially seeing in myself. And they were really good about pushing me to get out there and put my words on paper.
And that's kind of fun to have all of that support. And obviously they were right, because you have been writing.
Yes, they were.
So, a lot of aspiring authors that are out there may not have the same journalism background from an educated perspective. What kind of encouragement could you offer some of those authors so that they won't give up, and they'll get that book out for people?
I always tell them, first of all, just get the words on the paper. Get that first draft. Get that manuscript. So I've met so many people that tell me, I have a book in my head, but I haven't actually written it yet. Just put it on paper, because even though I have a journalism background, I still rely on editing. For example, I have a fabulous editor. Her name is Karen Rogers, and no matter how good I think something is, she can always take it and elevate it to the next level. So remember that writing isn't a solitary thing. It really will take a village. You'll need an editor. You'll need what they call beta readers, which are people that are willing to read a chapter or two of your book and give their opinion. So never think that writing is something that you're going to do alone, but you do have to take that first step and get your words on the paper so that you can start that process.
And that's great advice. I'd have to agree with you. Getting something down is probably the hardest part, but it gets easier the more you do it, right?
It does, and it's addictive. And people always think that, okay, I wrote that one book and I'm done. I have nothing else to say. But then you wait a while, another idea creeps up, and you're writing again. But that first one is always the hardest.
Mhm. So speaking of which, do you have some other books that you're working on in the background, or a specific book that you want to kind of give us, the inside scoop on?
Sure. I'll talk about two. One of them was just published in March, and it's Writing Time for Mother's Day. I have an essay that's featured in the latest edition of Chicken Soup for the Soul. As you know, that's a book series that's been around for probably more than a decade now. So I'm going to be featured in the one called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Best Mom Ever. So it's 101 stories from different authors telling stories about their mothers. It can be happy stories, sad stories, inspirational stories. So that one was just released in March, and it's available now right in time for Mother's Day. The other release,
congratulations,
is going to be thank you. I'm really excited about that one. My other release that will be another personal release for me will be released later this year. It's called The Old Landmark. And what I'm doing is celebrating the traditional church that's usually the cornerstone for a community. My dad grew up in a small town in Texas, Navasota, Texas. And one of the things that I love about when I go back to visit is just how much the church is just a part of that community. It's almost like a person and how it interacts with people and touches people's lives. And I wanted to celebrate that. So in my book, The Old Landmark, I talk about a church that does just that. It's been a cornerstone of a community for more than 100 years. It's had the same pastor for 50 years. And so I'm just writing the story about what is it like to be able to see the passage of time, but you're the one constant thing that some people have when they look at their community. So look for that one coming out later this year.
Wow, that sounds really exciting, and something that people that love history as well as love religion and community would really be thrilled to be able to take a look at. So do you seek out new beta readers, and how do you do that in case somebody out there would like to help you out?
I'm always looking for new beta readers. My email address is pwcwrites@gmail.com, so feel free to contact me there or check out my website, which is pwcwrites.com. And then also once or twice a year, I like to go to writers' conferences, but I'd like to go to the kind that also have readers that come and they want to meet the authors, because that's always a good opportunity to hear firsthand from readers. What do you like about books? What don't you like about books? If you were to have your ideal book, what would happen in that book? So it's always good to talk to those readers and just get a pulse of what they're looking for in that next book from you.
Mm-hmm. And do you like to read as well, Peyton?
I do. And now since I've been on this indie track, I'm really trying to do the best to read more independent authors as well as those that are through the main publishing houses.
Do you stick with the same genres in your own reading, or do you branch out to some other things?
I do a little bit of both. For example, in the Christian fiction genre, one of my favorite authors is also a Texas-based author. She lives outside of Dallas. Her name is Michelle Stimson. And then also, just sometimes I want to step outside of my realm, and one of my favorite authors is Carl Fields. And he writes a lot of murder mystery type novels, and that's something where I don't think I'd ever be able to write that myself, but it's fun to just dive into that world and see what's going on with his characters.
Yeah, that's definitely a difference from where you tend to write yourself, but that's interesting. So we've got your website, we've got your email. Where do you have some upcoming speaking engagements in case people are going to be in the area and want to meet you?
Certainly. In 2 weeks' time, and you can read about it more on my website, but in about 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be in Katy, Texas at Books A Million, which is one of our larger bookstore chains, and I'll be doing a book signing there. I'll be signing copies of the latest edition of Chicken Soup for the Soul, Best Mom Ever. So that would be an excellent opportunity for people to come out, and the Books A Million is located inside of Katy Mills Mall, which is one of our larger shopping centers. So I welcome people to stop by and meet me, and I'd love to meet them.
And I think that's really exciting. So, Peyton, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your time this evening and sharing with all of our listeners about your stories. I know that you've gotten some really recent awards, and I wish you all of the success that you can possibly have. I think being a storyteller at heart comes out in your conversation, and I really thank you, Peyton, for being here this evening.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed the opportunity, and I've enjoyed chatting about what I love to do.
Great. Have a nice evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Dear Texas Radio. To learn more about Dear Texas and its literacy programs, please visit their website at deartexas.info. I am Alex Anthony, your announcer. Have a great day. Dear Texas would like to thank our sponsors. I'm Alex Anthony, your announcer. For all inquiries regarding voiceover, narration, and announcing services as heard on this program, please make contact through voxluxstudio@gmail.com, voxluxstudio@gmail, or you can call 512-537-6077. Thank you for listening and for your support. Bourgeois Media and Consulting, a book publishing consultant where creative inspiration is realized. More at bourgeoismedia.com. Thank you for listening to Dear Texas Radio. To learn more about Dear Texas and its literacy programs, please visit their website at deartexas.info. I am Alex Anthony, your announcer. Have a great day.